You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Matt McGackie, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians. We talk all about their lives and music while sharing killer craft beers. If you've ever wanted to sneak backstage and share a beer with one of your favorite musicians, well, Vox and Hops is the podcast for you. This week on the podcast, I dropped a killer episode with Kelly Schaefer of Atheist. There is this episode and over 440 other ones to help you enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. So what are you waiting for? It's time to become a Vox and Hops head. Cheers.
Hey, what is up, good people? Welcome to another episode of the podcast. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I've got a few bullet points I got to hit right at the top, so let's get right into it. And let's not forget the third one is the most important one, but they're all important, so here we go. First of all, this episode was recorded in two basically half-hour chunks, half-hour-ish chunks. When Barry and I first went to record, we tried it when he was on vacation and had less than optimal internet, and we eventually had to pause it because there was just too much delay to continue a good quality conversation. So the first half, you might hear a little bit of talking over each other, a little bit of that here and there, more than normal, I should say, but it's still really good. There's some really good information in there. There's some really good talking points that I think you're really going to enjoy. And then we pause and wait till he gets back home and we continue the conversation about a week later. Either way, it all makes sense. I think it's still a really, really, really good episode and you are going to enjoy it. Secondly, if you're listening to this episode on the day it drops, you still have the opportunity to win a tube amp. What? Yeah, a serious tube amp, courtesy of StuMac. So if you go over to the Tone Mob Instagram, go back to the collab post with StuMac. It's real easy. Just follow the instructions that are written in the caption. You follow both of us, you tag a friend. It's that classic giveaway. I haven't done one that easy in a long time, and big shout out to StuMac. They are assembling this one. This is not a kit. This is a fully assembled, ready to rock, cool P reverb combo. It's really, really sick. You're not going to want to miss it, but it ends Tuesday. So if you're listening to this right now, you're going to want to go over to the Tone Mob Instagram and follow both of us, do all that stuff. Look at that post. The instructions are all there. Again, this is over Tuesday, December 12th, 2023. So if you're hearing this in the future, I do apologize, but hey, follow along. You never know when something else might pop up. All right, I said this one was the most important, and I seriously mean it. This is very, very important all around. Not only will you get the opportunity to win a whole bunch of stuff, you will also be helping out somebody that is part of the Tone Mob community and who really, really needs it right now. So, friend of the show, Will Lehue, reached out, and I always am never sure if I'm butchering your name or not, but Will reached out and informed me about another friend of the show whose family could seriously use your help right now. That is Doug Christ. Doug Christ has been a member of the guitar podcast community for a very long time. He's been very active. He has his own podcasts. He's done a lot of stuff. He's also the owner of 37 Effects. He's a really great dude. I've enjoyed being on his podcast. I've enjoyed interacting with him. He's just a real quality dude and has been a part of the community for a long time. His son, Tim Christ, has been on the heart transplant list for around a decade, and it's recently gotten so bad that he has had to move into the hospital full-time to be cared for there until he can find an acceptable donor. Tim is a father and a husband, and as you can imagine, going down to one income for the family is extremely challenging, not to mention the mounting hospital bills that come with something like this. So Tim's sister set up a GoFundMe. And Will, I know this is a long story, bear with me here. Will wanted to do more to try to help out this GoFundMe. So Will is putting together a massive giveaway in conjunction with this GoFundMe. Up for grabs is stuff from us at Stringjoy, Solid Gold Effects, Wampler Pedals, Mataverse. There are guitars up for grabs. There are swag packs up for grabs from Third Man Records. There is a ton of stuff, and it's going to get continually updated because Will has reached out to a lot of people. Oh yeah, Copper Sound pedals. There's a ton of people that Will has reached out to, and it will get updated more and more and more. And the way you enter this bad boy is by going to the GoFundMe, which is, of course, linked in the show notes, because that would be way too long of a link. It's, they put a lot of digits in there. Go to the link in the show notes to go to the GoFundMe for Tim, where if you donate $25 will be the rate per entry. $25, send a screenshot, a receipt, some sort of proof of your donation to newheartfortim@gmail.com. Again, that email address is newheartfortim@gmail.com. Every $25 you donate to the GoFundMe counts as an entry. So if you donate $100, you're going to get 4 entries. Now, I am not administering this contest. I just wanted to let you know that it's going on because it's a good way to help somebody that's a part of the guitar podcast community. And all these donations are going to go towards helping keep his family afloat during this extremely difficult time and any bills associated with this very expensive process as he fights it out there every single day. So that is the information that I have. Again, the links and all of that and the email address will be in the show notes. Just open that up in whatever podcast player you're listening to this on, and you can find all those details. Again, I'm not administering this contest. I'm not actually selecting anything. I'm just letting you know that it's happening so that you can help out and enter, and you're just informed. Will at the Just Surprise Me podcast is my contact for all this stuff. So if you need more information, that would be the person to contact over this. And I'm sure you can do that via the newheartfortim@gmail.com email address. The giveaway is over January 5th, 2024 at midnight Pacific time. So get your entries in before then. I believe they're planning on drawing them the next day. Again, contact them over there for all the details. I know that was a lot. I'm sorry. That's the way these things go sometimes, but let's get right into this episode with Barry from Grez Guitars. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Tone Mob Podcast, the show about guitar stuff, occasionally, sometimes. I'm your host, Blake Weiland, and with me today I have Barry Grzebik of Grez Guitars. He's returning. He's got tales to tell. There's been a lot of updates over there, and since he's come on, I can officially say that my Mendocino baritone is, without a doubt, my most played guitar in the shred shed. So it's an honor to have you back, man.
That's awesome. I appreciate you having me. It's good to talk to you and see you.
Yeah. Yep. It was kind of a last minute thing, but we made it happen. So here we are.
I mean, it's way better than the usual running into at NAMM where you've got, a few seconds before you're interrupted.
Exactly. But I wanted to get you back on because we'd been texting a little bit back and forth over the last couple of years. And, last I left you, you were doing the guitars, I don't want to say on the side, but like the acoustician stuff was your main gig. And so if anybody wants to go back and get the whole tale, we're not going to rehash everything. So go back and listen to the first time Barry came on. You can get his full story there. This is an update, is what this conversation is going to be. So recently you've kind of switched those, is my understanding. So let's talk about that.
It wasn't really a controlled switch. It was just like a natural progression. But and I don't remember when we spoke last, but it's got to 5 years ago. I don't know, a while anyway.
I think it was right during when lockdown started.
Oh,
I believe.
Not that long ago, really.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, 3-ish years ago.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So there was a period of time where I was building maybe 10 guitars a year, and working as a consultant full time. And, that just 10 became 20, became 30, et cetera, et cetera. And before you know it, I'm kind of building guitars full time and the consulting has taken a back seat. And it's really the case. Like I'm building guitars all day, every day, helping the shop every day. So it's not just me at this point. And I'm still taking on consulting work and happy to do that, but I don't really look for it. People who know me and need some help contact me and I'm happy to do the work, but really just it's guitars.
That's awesome. So it wasn't really an intentional, like, I really want to do this instead. So I had, it was probably when we spoke more last, of I probably
had help in the shop like 1 or 2 days a week only.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of kept creeping up. Each year I'm like, well, all right, we're doing 3 days a week of help, and then 4 days a week of help, and 5 now. And so it's still, a small operation, but it's a livelihood.
Yeah. That's about all we can ask for these days. Is like get to do things you're interested in. That's
That's right.
that's a big win right there. So I kind of froze on you there for a minute. I don't think you heard what I said, but so it was very much a natural progression. It wasn't so much an intentional one, if I'm reading that correctly.
Yes. I mean, I always sort of planned and expected the business to grow, but I'd never put solid benchmarks. Like, if it grew at 2% a year or 20% a year, whatever, I'm happy. Mm-hmm. It just happened to be more like 20 than 2, it turned out. But it was just however it happened, it happened. I'm pretty good about going with the flow and seeing, what opportunities should be jumped on and go in that direction.
Nice. So you had a project, switching gears just slightly. I want to know about this. When I realized that you had transitioned here more into the guitar space, you were actually on your way to a consulting gig. Now it's something to do with, if I remember correctly, a canning factory or something, and it's just something outside of the realm of what most people would think. You'd think design a concert hall, design a recording studio, something like that. Yep. But trying to reduce noise in a manufacturing operation is probably not what springs to most people's mind.
Sometimes it's more diverse than you think. You think, I'm working in churches and concert halls and auditoriums, but sometimes it's train stations or manufacturing plants, and this was, I probably shouldn't name any names, but let's just say a very large factory making cans, like you'd have like beer cans. Mm-hmm. And giant presses and production lines, and the noise is insane. So you get a call that's sort of like, well, we can't understand our paging system. We've heard you're the guy that can come out and help us figure this out. And, whatever it is, sure. Whatever it is, I'll figure it out. That's kind of my shtick there, right? So I show up, and then I'm kind of in awe of how loud it is. Like, I mean, it probably was an average of 100 dBA sound pressure level, just a uniform blanket of noise over the whole production floor. Mm-hmm. Which means the employees all have to wear ear protection.
Okay. Yep.
Right. So now you've got to have a paging system that is able to get above 100 decibels of background noise, plus overcome the fact that you have 30 decibels of attenuation from your earplugs or your over-ear protection, whatever you're wearing.
Jeez.
And it's just... so a lot of times you see people put paging systems in or sound systems in even, and they kind of know what they're doing, but it's a forgiving situation and it just kind of works out. Mm-hmm. And this is one of those cases that was not forgiving in any way. So everything had to be optimized just as much as possible to just barely get it to work. And that's when, sometimes maybe the average person falls short. Is trying to, eke 99% out of the system. Mm-hmm. And so I guess I was able to do that.
So can you talk about what you had to do to make that happen?
Sure.
This is just fascinating to me on a personal level.
One is that the frequency response of the paging system was essentially flat, like the frequency response of any system would be, except that people are listening to it with hearing protection in, and hearing protection alters the energy that is getting into your eardrums, basically, right? So your hearing protection, it does not give you uniform attenuation across the frequency range, right? We all know that. You put earplugs in and everything sounds muffly now, right?
Right.
Which means it's attenuating higher frequencies more than mid and low frequencies. And we need high frequencies for speech intelligibility, right? The English language especially is very sibilance oriented, lots of S's and TH's and all that kind of stuff. And if you lose all that, everything just becomes mumbled and muffly and you can't tell what's going on. So the first thing to do was to overemphasize those frequencies so that when it was listened to through the filter of the headphones, it sounded flat. Restoring those frequencies. Now, if you listen to it without hearing protection, it would sound crazy bright. But there should be nobody on the floor without hearing protection, so it doesn't matter.
Right.
Right. So we're restoring some of those frequencies that are just absolutely required for speech intelligibility. And then there's the question of, providing, almost like you would in the studio environment, providing some compression and some limiting so you can tighten up the envelope of energy that is a page and then get the volume pushed up, right? Increase your density of energy so that it can be louder. Like, you don't want transients at that point that are clipping the system with the average energy being low. You need the average energy to be high, so we need to compress down the transients. So we can get a little more, so you get 2 or 3 more dB out of the system by doing that. Plus you've pushed up the intelligibility. And then we walk around the floor and we look at, the sound system itself was laid out in a grid. Every 20 feet there's a speaker, or 30 feet, whatever it is, which is something some designer would do without really knowing what's going on in the space.
Sure.
But at some point you want to overlay the activities in the space with the sound system layout and adjust the density to say, this is some really loud machinery. We need a speaker every 20 feet. Over in this corner where there's nothing going on, we can have a speaker every 35 feet. So in a few places we change the type of speaker, in a few places we increase the density or the spacing. Just a whole bunch of little tweaks to get it to just perform barely adequately enough, which is kind of the best we could do, but that's better than not functioning at all, right? Because it's not just paging. A lot of times this is also a life safety issue, right? That's the only way to communicate with people in some of these cases.
So would you do any?
It's a little bit
obviously you boost
how it goes.
certain
it sounds
frequencies.
sort of simple.
Do you do any attenuation?
Rehashing it? It's a little less simple when you're just like walking in cold to a space and somebody says, "Here, this doesn't work. Figure out what the heck we have and why it doesn't work and fix it."
So there's some compromises there, I imagine, that you have to make.
There are, and a lot of times the compromises have to do with budget. Because we could just rip it all out and put bigger speakers in, but that's probably not in the cards, right? It's how do we make what we have work?
Right.
Or with at least minimal investment.
And then, how successful would you rate this project? Are you satisfied with the outcome? Would you have liked to have been able to do a little more, or what's your temperature on it?
Oh, I feel like it's pretty hard. Boy, that's a tough one. I feel like I solved their problems. Mm-hmm. They feel like it's acceptable, maybe. Like, I feel like I did a better job because I know how bad it was and that I've made it work. And I know that there's really nothing else to be done. Sometimes the layperson looks at it like, well, it doesn't work and now it just works okay. Not fully appreciating that okay that's amazing. That's as good as it's going to get. So the layperson might be thinking, well, it doesn't sound amazing still. What did you do? Not understanding it's never going to sound amazing.
Right. Right.
But on the flip side, this corporation has since hired me for other projects, so I guess they were happy enough.
Hey, there you go. I guess
right.
That speaks a lot, right? As long as you're getting repeat business, then it obviously they were satisfied with the performance. But yeah, it seems like just one of the trickiest projects I've heard about anybody tackling in quite some time. But I'm assuming it's not your first go around with that type of environment, the way you're talking about it.
No, it isn't. And a lot of this has to do with, just having, the old been there, done that, right? I mean, not to say that I've done everything, but I've been doing this a long time at a pretty high level, and venues and facilities all over the world, and so there's a point where you can, with some confidence, walk into any situation and just know that, well, whatever it is, I'll figure it out and we'll fix it. We'll make it work.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever ran into a situation that was just like, there's not a lot we can do here unless we revamp literally everything about this?
Usually when it's a unsolvable problem like that, it's really more to do with customer expectations than technical issues. Like they want something that just isn't possible.
Yes.
So it becomes more of like managing expectations than coming up with a technical solution.
I think you run into that in just about every business, right?
Right.
Right.
Managing expectations. That's everything.
Yeah, I can't tell you the amount of times that people are like, how come you can't make a 80-inch scale string? And it's like, well, let me tell you, it is
Yeah.
physically possible. Do you want this string to cost $25,000? Like, it's a thing that is it's not impossible, but it's unreasonable.
That's right.
So it's yeah, I think we run into that all over the place. Do you ever get any
Yeah.
crazy requests for guitars, or is that limited because you kind of just do what you do?
Well, I mean, I'm getting better at saying no. That's kind of the trick, right? Is when people ask for things, there's a point where you're just happy to have a sale and you say yes to practically anything. And now I'm sort of getting better at saying, this is a Grez guitar and there are certain parameters we can change. And then there's certain parameters that when we go beyond this, it's really not a Grez guitar anymore. It's just you want to design some custom thing and have me make it.
Right.
And so I'm trying really hard to limit that. In my mind, I'm thinking, all right, 3 things. You want to change the color? Great. You want a bound neck with block inlays? Great. Do you want to change the pickups? Great. Like pick 3. That seems like it works. Like it's still a Grez, maybe tweaked a little bit to your liking. You want a fatter neck, a skinnier neck, whatever. But like I've had people come to me and say, I love your guitars. I'm so excited to get one. And then here's all the things I want to change. And I look at the list and I'm thinking, this is not really one of my guitars anymore. Like, the idea of having a Grez, but if I do all the things you just asked me to do, we're making a Telly. Or, I don't know.
Right. Why don't you go to Fender for that one?
Yeah.
They make one just like it. And it's, off the shelf, ready to go the way you want it. And I get that, that there is some level of, when you order from a smaller shop, that is part of the appeal, is that you can adjust things to the way you want and, tweak things here and there. But, this baritone you sent me, and I think I said this when you sent it to me the first time just to check out initially, I was like, well, this is exactly what I would have ordered. So
there you go. And that's exactly what I make, right? It's in a way, it's not custom. It's just, that's like a regular blacktop Mendocino baritone.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a bunch of them out there at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's phenomenal. I've wore the volume pod out on it.
Well, that's cool. I appreciate hearing that. That just because you've had it long enough now that some people would be like, well, I'm on to the next thing, but you're still digging it. And that's awesome.
I play it now that I this is no fault of yours at all. This is a guitar that I use the volume pod on everything pretty frequently. I'm one of those guys. I like to explore the different textures of the amps or the pedals I'm running into. And, but on that one in particular, I feel it's particularly responsive with those pickups and the way the body reacts and everything. Mm-hmm. So I find myself grabbing that volume knob probably 20% more than I even normally would. And so, I've totally wore it out. And it's the main guitar I played on my American Cyclops stuff. And you can hear all those volume swells and everything that go on. That's that guitar. That's that knob working hard. So I'm not surprised, and talking to Sean at Gun Street, who does all this stuff, he's like, yeah, they're rated for X number of spins. And it sounds like you've went beyond that. You've done so not
yeah. I have 1 or 2 other customers that kind of burn through knobs like that. Like a lot of like pedal steel licks where just on that volume pot all the time, swelling it up and down. And most people don't wear out their pots, but some sure do.
I have only done it on one other guitar, and that guitar was my first electric guitar, my Les Paul Special that I've had since I was 16. So, that makes sense too. I wore out that volume pot at some point, but yeah, this one, right. I say all that to say I play it a lot. And now that it needs one, because it's totally shot, I'm like, I have to get this over to Sean as soon as possible, because I'm realizing how much I just grab for it instinctually. And it's like, I can't do it. It doesn't work right now. And it's just like,
So Gun Street's in Portland, right? So you can like physically take it to him.
I'm gonna take it to him. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we've done a couple little projects. He wouldn't normally do that, like in-house installs, but we're business partners, so
you kind of know the guy. Yeah.
Yeah, it works out. He joined. I don't know if you've seen the announcement, but String Joy, we did a merger here was it last year or the year before now? It's hard to keep track. So
I was aware. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of the listeners still aren't. I understand these. You're on the internet. You're bombarded with things all day. It's hard to keep track of it all. But so it's a little different situation. And I say all that to say is don't expect Sean to let you into your house, everybody. If you hear this, and he's not going to work on your wiring in person.
Yeah.
You literally have to go into his basement, and I don't think he wants that. Hey, Sean, I know you're going to hear this. Sorry, I'm blabbering too much. But we'll get that done here pretty soon, probably after the Thanksgiving holiday and whatnot settles down. So, but yeah, it's really a magical guitar, and I'm assuming you've come out with some other stuff since then too. It's trying to keep track of the timeline here, but I've seen some juniors come out. There's been a few things. What else have you been working on?
Yeah, the juniors have really done well for me. Let's see, long and a short scale bass version that are both semi-hollow. So it's like your baritone, except instead of 28.5-inch scale, it's 30. And of course it's a bass, but the basic construction is the same, just, configured into a bass.
Yeah.
And those are doing pretty well considering I've not been known as a bass builder, right? That was my concern wasn't, does this bass suck? It's more, do people in the bass community even know who I am? It's just not something I've chased before. But it's been good. Yeah. So I'm probably, it's not like we're making tons of basses. I probably sell a bass a month, something like that. But that's great.
That's pretty cool.
And I love the short scale bass. It's just tons of fun.
I really want to try one. I know you're not going to have a booth this year at NAMM, but one of these days I'd like to put my greasy mitts on them. If you ever come up to Portland, so I know you guys were planning on coming, and then the world shut off, and it was this whole crazy thing. But one of these days when you guys get back up here, I'd love to try a bass out. It'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really funny. Twice we tried to come up there. I think once was COVID, stopped us. And then the second time was when those crazy fires were happening.
Yeah.
So we didn't go.
Yeah. That was not a good time to come up. So you made the right choice there. We got put on an evac notice actually. So which has never happened in the town I live in my grandpa's whole life, who's in his 80s. So that was wild and not fun. but yeah.
Damn.
Yeah. And then I talked I tell this story all the time. And then I talked to the fire chief recently. They had an open house at one of the fire departments. And he was like, yeah, that wasn't supposed to happen. You guys weren't in any danger. You shouldn't have been put on an evac notice.
Oh,
I was like,
sure.
Great. You panicked half the town, by the way. So yeah,
right.
That was fun. But yeah, anyway, all that aside, one thing we didn't really talk about last time, and I don't know why, but the wood that you use for a lot of these, you have a rather unique source for the redwood that you use. Can you talk about that a little more? I'm surprised we didn't get into this last time, but I don't think we did.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I like to use reclaimed wood wherever I can. It's pretty hard to make the entire instrument from reclaimed wood. It's possible, but so what I focus on is the tops, since these are semi-hollow instruments. So up in Northern California where I am, and I guess even up to Portland where you are, we've got lots of redwood forests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Mostly where you are, but we have a few.
Okay, it doesn't quite get up to you. So 150 years ago, these redwood trees were first growth trees, right? These were kind of virgin forests. And these old redwood trees were, 1,000 years old, 2,000 years old, just amazing old trees. And back then they were just cutting them down to build everything, right? It was just the local raw material. So bridges and tunnels and buildings, houses, everything, factories was made from this amazing old redwood. And now 150 years later, a lot of these things are coming down because they're just old. They've reached the end of their service life. Mm-hmm. And I can get a hold of some of this wood and build instruments out of it. And, it turns out that redwood is an amazing material to build musical instruments from. It's stiff, it's light, it has really interesting resonant qualities. And it's, at least the wood that I'm using, it's well seasoned, right? It's a 100-year-old piece of wood.
Right.
And wood changes when it gets older. And so, like, if you buy a new piece of wood, it's been kiln dried, and that kiln drying gets rid of the moisture. It dries the wood, but it doesn't get rid of, or in reality, crystallize the resins in the wood, right? So if you've got an old 2x4 you've had around for 10, 20 years and you cut into it, you can sometimes still get pitch coming out of it, right? The gooey sap, basically.
Totally. Mm-hmm.
And when you have a really old piece of wood, that sap has crystallized, and it changes the way the wood vibrates and the way it sounds. You can think about, like, people getting all worked up about too much finish on a guitar, right? If you just slather on tons of finish, we know it kind of robs some tone, right? Because you're wrapping the wood in a blanket that's damping the resonance.
Right.
But internally, there's things in the wood cell structure that dampens resonance. And that's things like sap and pitch. It's almost like there's rubber running through the veins of the wood. And when that stuff finally dries and crystallizes, the wood becomes more resonant, more glass-like. So to me, it's like cheating. I'm making a brand new instrument from a really old, well-seasoned piece of wood. And especially, you can hear it in the Mendocinos, but you can really hear it in the Juniors, because the Juniors are made from a solid chunk of redwood. It's one piece, no glue joints, just a big old chunk of solid redwood. And
wow,
it really behaves similarly to a lot of the really best vintage Juniors. And I've had customers compare them, and it gets you into that same neighborhood, right, of something that's 50 plus years old. Mm-hmm. But it's brand new.
That's really cool. You bringing this up, and your knowledge of stuff is really interesting because you come at it from the acoustical background, and then also, obviously you're good at working with wood and you understand the characteristics of it better than I think a lot of people do. Are there any, I guess maybe misconceptions would be the right way to put it? Anything that's out there in the guitar world as maybe common knowledge that you can either dispel or, on the opposite side, confirm that, no, indeed, there is something to it. Because when you were talking about the old wood and how it crystallizes and everything, I'm like, oh, that actually makes so much sense. And I didn't really think about that being a factor in how the instrument actually responds. Are there other things like that?
Yeah. Well, that's a tough one because there are so many weird things you hear. And I don't keep a list of them, but I certainly hear a lot of them. Obviously we could get into and I don't even really want to get into does tone wood matter debate, right? I think it does. And if you don't think it does, that's fine. I'm not got more important things to do than argue with people about this sort of thing. But, from my standpoint, you can hear the difference between different fretboard materials, different neck materials. If I make a Junior and that's spec'd out much like a Gibson Junior, but it has a redwood body instead of a mahogany body, I can hear a difference that's quite clear, both acoustically and plugged in. Mm-hmm. And it's just that redwood sounds different than mahogany. Mm-hmm. So, I don't think, to me, there's just absolutely no question how not only does wood matter, but everything matters, right? Everything has tone. Every material has a sound when you tap on it. So, everything you bolt to the guitar does something to the sound. It's adding something or taking something away. It's interacting with the system. And at some point, though, you get into not which materials are best, but just understanding that they matter and then figuring out which materials you like. Like for me, I don't care for stainless steel in a bridge. Lots of people love stainless steel in a bridge. That's fine. I don't care for it. I like steel. Mm-hmm. One's not better than the other. It's just different. And maybe that's like the biggest thing that I kind of like to repeat over and over and over again to people when I talk to them is in our industry, people tend to confuse their opinions with fact.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
that's
right.
a big
if you
one.
like it better, that's great. That doesn't mean it is better.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Hi, I'm Vincent, and I'm here to talk about the Mercury X. My dad's always going on and on about how cool Maris is. He really went off on one about the Mercury X the other day. He said something about a 4,800 hertz sample rate and 99 preset locations in 33 banks, and something along the lines of the most advanced reverb pedal ever devised by man? That's all true, but I only care about one thing. This pedal sounds sick. So make sure you check out the Mercury X and all the other fine products at maris.us, as well as fine retailers worldwide. All right, Dad, now can I have my Pocky?
How exactly do artists get their music on Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, Tidal, all these services? How in the world do you get your music there? Well, in the past, you had to use something called a record label. But these days, you can use DistroKid. DistroKid is the absolute easiest way to get your music up on streaming services. And it's the most affordable way to do so. Not only do plans start at $22.99 for the entire year, that's less than $2 a month, DistroKid also does not take a cut of your streaming revenue, unlike some other services out there. Even better if you sign up by going to tonemob.com/distrokid. That's tonemob.com/distrokid. One more time, that's tonemob.com/distrokid. You'll get 30% off. That's right, 30% off their already extremely reasonable prices. So go to tonemob.com/distrokid and get your music out there. And better for what, right? I actually have a video idea that I'm just a little Instagram clip I'm planning on making at some point. Maybe I'll just snip this out. I don't know. We'll see. Where I think best is kind of dumb. Like it's a
really silly thing to say.
Yeah. I mean, there are things that are, if not done properly, they don't function right. They don't do what they're intended to do. So that's one thing.
That's right. Those are like minimum quality standards you're expected to hit. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I personally like Les Pauls better than Stratocasters because I do. And I'll joke about it and be like, Stratocasters are blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And I'll make jokes about it. But do I actually think that a Les Paul is a better instrument than a Stratocaster? Well, no, I don't. It's a different instrument. It does different things that I prefer and that I like better. But it's not a better instrument. In some ways, the Strat is a more cleverly designed instrument. So, trying to say that one's better than the other or something like that is just silly, where you'll hear it all day on the internet that this sucks and this one's better and that sucks and this one's better. It's like, by what standard exactly? Some people need a fuzz face.
And I even
some
hear
people
it from other
need a
makers,
Chase Bliss pedal. It's just they're just different tools for different jobs.
Yeah. So I try not to say ever, we make better guitars. We use the best materials. This is the best. We're the best. We're the cleverest. It's like we make a good product and it's going to appeal to some people and not to others, and that's okay. But nothing's ever the best. What's the best? I don't know.
Barry, welcome back.
Hey, I can see and hear you.
Yeah,
now.
this is helpful, right? So for the listeners, we took a pause. We attempted to record. That's probably why maybe the conversation sounded a little weird for the first half of the show. We were dealing with some spotty internet and trying to make it work, but we eventually decided the best course of action was probably just to wait till things were more solid. So here we are. We're back.
Yeah. And, full disclosure, that was all me. I was on vacation on a beautiful lake in rural Alabama, and internet was, not awesome.
Right.
Everything else was awesome, but the internet, no.
Yeah. Well, I was harassing him on vacation is what was going on. Yeah. But, in between now and then, we started talking about some things that I thought, we texted about something that I think is kind of an interesting maybe topic to spin off of here, which is probably a complete segue from what we were talking about, because full disclosure, I didn't go back and listen to it. So
I didn't either. I'm not sure what we were talking about when we quit.
So this is probably a rather abrupt subject change, but hey, it's fine. It's the way these things go sometimes. But we were talking about, I had a harebrained idea right before I fell asleep, probably due to the fact that we just had a conversation. And I was just thinking, with your knowledge of woodworking and your knowledge of acoustics, have you ever thought about something that's rather important to electric guitarists is the cabinet, the thing that actually produces the sound? And you had some interesting notes there. So I thought maybe that'd be a good jumping off point.
Yeah, I mean, I could probably rattle on until you lose all your listeners on this topic.
I doubt it. Let's get nerdy. Let's go.
Yeah, so maybe you know this and maybe you don't, but earlier in my career, when I was in my 20s and 30s, I made my living as a loudspeaker designer.
I did not know that. Maybe you said that last time. I can't remember.
Yeah,
but
so
I don't.
So I do happen to know some things about cabinet design and speaker design, and I've designed studio monitors and giant line array concert PAs and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And as just an interesting aside, something I've been thinking about lately, which didn't occur to me originally, is when you're designing a speaker, everything you're doing is about controlling resonances and knocking down resonances, stiffening panels, making things not ring, right? Because and this is the same conversation that happens with guitars. Every material has a sound,
right?
Whether it's the saddle or the tuner or the fretboard, everything has some sort of inherent sound, and it may or may not be adding enough to be perceivable, but they all do something.
Mm-hmm.
So the same thing with the speaker, the basket material, the cone material, the surround, how much doping is put on the surround, is the cabinet, everything matters. Everything has a sound. So with speakers, you're trying to kill all that, because what you want is the loudspeaker to reproduce precisely what it's given, not to add any coloration, not to do anything weird. And with guitars, it's exactly the same, but the opposite. Like we're trying to draw out as much resonance as possible, make everything ring. And, because all the different weird resonances and rings kind of is what gives each instrument its unique character,
mm-hmm.
right? So I don't know, I feel like it's the opposite of speaker design, which is kind of weird, but that's not your question. Your question is about cabinets and maybe even drivers.
Yeah, both of them.
Driver design.
Yeah, both.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess we all know that when you're designing a studio monitor or something like that, it's trying to be inert. And that's a really hard thing to do, because if you think about like a big woofer, 12-inch woofer or whatever it is, we're listening to it, and it could be 110 decibels it's generating, right? It's loud.
Mm-hmm.
And in a loudspeaker, traditional loudspeaker, half of that energy is coming off the front of the cone and we hear it. And half the energy is coming off the back of the cone, and the cabinet has to dissipate that and contain it. You can't let it out. Anything that leaks out from the backside is coloration, causing problems.
Okay.
So with a guitar cabinet, you have potentially an open back. You're just letting it out. And it does things, like if you were, there are hi-fi speakers with open backs, but usually when the people use those, they're really particular about where they place them, because you get that reflection off the back wall. And is that reflection doing something good or bad? Is it making it sound cool or causing a big hole?
Right. And maybe they're putting some absorption back there or some sort of something to dissipate it. break it up.
But with guitar cabinets, we have open backs and we just sort of plop them down and go.
Yeah.
I mean, you could think about what's going on behind it, but we don't usually, right?
Sure.
So there's like the first thing that comes to mind is just that back wave hits something and it does something, and it generally fills the room, right? I guess we kind of know that an open back cabinet fills the room differently than a closed back cabinet.
Right.
And that's just, and it would do so differently depending on where you put it.
And some people mic the open backs when they're recording occasionally.
You could. It depending on how close you mic it, it's out of phase, so you have to flip that mic. So that's kind of a weird thing that is something we don't even think about, where the audiophiles probably obsess about.
Sure.
The exact placement of those speakers and where those reflections are going.
That makes sense too. Now that you say that, because I hadn't thought about it at all until this very moment. That I've never seen a pair of studio monitors that have an open back.
That's right.
Doesn't exist as far as I'm aware.
And even with a closed back, you're getting energy that wraps around the back of the cabinet and hits that back wall. So you still, like, you'll never see a studio monitor pinned up against the wall. Right. There's always some space between it and the wall, and it's very carefully placed in the room, so everything works. And we don't do any of that with our guitar cabinets normally. Maybe some recording studios do, but for just like regular people, just plug in and go.
I have a funny story for you once we get through this part.
And and then the cabinet itself is one of those things that there's no right or wrong answer, because everyone has different preferences. But a really stoutly built cabinet, which in the guitar world would be something made out of Baltic birch, probably, very high number of plies, void free, really stiff cabinet, does affect the sound less than like a super lightly built pine cabinet, where you almost want those sides to vibrate and do weird things, because all those weird things make it sound cooler.
Right.
Well, to me, there are definitely people who prefer the super stout cabinet, and they think that sounds better. Maybe that's not just personal preference, but music genre, style, preference. Like, the more tight and precise cabinet lends itself to certain kinds of music more than others.
Yeah, especially like higher gain, down tune, like metal type stuff that's real chuggy and fast, that needs a lot of precision and definition, whereas something maybe a little more vibey, a little more rock and roll or folksy, the pine cab's more the vibe. And I've got both here for both purposes.
You can almost equate it to microphonics and pickups. It's kind of similar. Like, I like pickups that are lightly potted or not potted. I like all that microphonic, that just a little bit of extra liveliness, which is kind of like what happens from a lightly built cabinet. But for other styles of music or personal preferences, pot it for days. That works better.
Yep. That's true.
Let's see, what else? Oh, the baffle too. Geez. Right? I mean, I think some Fender models are known for having the baffle being very loosely attached to the cabinet.
Yeah, sometimes so with I think 2 points maybe on each. Very, very it's just kind of floating around in there.
So you're extending the size of your speaker, right? You bolt a 12-inch speaker into this lightly constrained baffle, and now the whole baffle is moving.
Oh.
And that totally changes how the sound radiates from the speaker.
Right. So in your estimation, was this more of a product of intent design, say on Leo's part, or was it just like, hey, let's just see what happens. We got to have a speaker in here, so screw it in there and see this is what it sounds like.
I think it was that they were early in the evolution of loudspeakers.
Oh, that's true. That was really,
right?
really early, actually. Yeah.
That's right. So it's not like loudspeakers didn't exist before Fender amps, but it was still in its infancy. And so I think, Leo is obviously known for, using stuff that's cheap, right? So pine or whatever he could get cheap, he may have just been making things out of whatever he made them out of. Most of the time, I think he was worried about durability. He was worried about how loud it could get, right? Because that was the whole point of having an amp, is getting louder.
Sure.
And we know his thing was trying to be loud and clean, even though people didn't use his products that way, right? but the actual fidelity, like if you were using it as an audiophile product, I mean, he certainly cared about it and was aware of it, but I don't know how much that was the primary goal, because we were playing guitars through it.
Right. You're not trying
Or he
to.
wasn't trying to make a hi-fi thing. I don't think,
That doesn't appear to be the case, and especially with all the different designs in. I mean, they all have kind of that similar-ish Fender tone, but they certainly don't seem like they were trying to accurately reproduce anything. It was just make it louder.
It's like when you went to the blackface stuff, and there was this giant mid scoop.
Mm-hmm.
It's a cool sound, but I mean, it's a giant mid scoop. That's not a flat speaker. If you're trying to make a speaker, you're trying to make it flat.
Right.
Maybe you could say that's compensating for the hump that the speaker had in its response. So the giant mid scoop and the electronics flattens that out, or who knows?
Right.
But
what about the drivers themselves?
Yeah, they also are kind of peculiar.
And for the guitarists in the room, that driver equals speaker. Most of you probably know that, but just so we're speaking the same language here.
Yeah, so there was an evolution of the loudspeaker that went on from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And there was a point where the loudspeaker started to get, or the driver, I should say, started to get lower and lower distortion, higher power handling. It was just becoming better and better and better. Mm-hmm. But there was a divergence where all of that improvement really started to appear mostly in the hi-fi and studio monitor world, or live sound PA world. And the sound that guitar players had locked onto was the sound of a speaker, maybe from the 60s. Mm-hmm. And so if we look at most guitar speakers, they're 1960s technology at best.
Right.
Yeah, maybe there's a few outliers out there, but so you don't see, like you see in pro audio and other markets, you don't see polypropylene cones or Kevlar cones, or you don't see aluminum dome tweeters being added to extend the response or whatever. It stopped at being a cone.
Right.
And a cone that, right, they didn't try to extend the response anymore. Right. And that's kind of what plugins try to fix now, right? Because we all know if we as a kid, I would plug my guitar into my stereo and it sounded weird.
Yeah. Sound terrible.
Right. Because it was, it sounded terrible. So, because that's a full range thing. And we're used to hearing a guitar through a not full range thing, a speaker that gets to 2 or 3K if you're lucky, or something like that.
Right.
The distortion components of that is all of those guitar speakers are pretty high too. Mm-hmm. Like totally not really what would be acceptable in modern day hi-fi or studio monitor stuff. But we like that, right? It's just like the cabinet adding weird stuff to the sound. Mm-hmm. We kind of like the fact that the cone is super thin and it kind of breaks up when you hammer it, and the voice coil is really kind of small and the magnet's weak, so you can overdrive it and almost modulate the magnetic field a little bit. I mean, it's just doing all kinds of stuff that's technically bad, but we like that. Yeah.
That's guitar in a nutshell, or at least electric guitar, right? Everything. The fuzz pedal came from a broken console. Modulation happened because people started messing with tape in ways they weren't supposed to. And it's just like the whole thing with electric guitars, pushing amps to where they were doing things they weren't really designed to do. The whole story with electric guitar is just like guitar players breaking things and discovering they like the broken sound.
Right. It's like technology making it better isn't helping.
No.
It doesn't make it sound better.
No. And it's kind of an interesting
that was kind of like one of the things Les Paul was obsessed with, right?
Yes, there have been advancements and there have been improvements. I mean, we get into seeing the later
he was always trying to get more and more precise of a sound, and that didn't really catch on with everyone else. No. Everyone's else like, no, we kind of like this. Stop messing with it.
Yeah, stop breaking it. Exactly. So I told you I was going to have a funny story about speaker placement, and some of the listeners have probably heard me tell this before, but it's one of the dumbest things I've ever done in recording, because I know better, but I did it anyway. So I had, I'm good friends with Chris Benson, and he had a special amp that I was shooting a little video for. And I'd played it at a shop. This thing sounds great. This is killer. All right, I'll bring it up back to the shed and I'll get it mic'd up and do the whole thing. And I get on and I'm playing it and I'm trying to record it. I got it set up in the room. Everything's looking really good. Mic placements, kind of where I typically try to start with things, at least. And it just sounds really bad. And I'm so confused because, this is not exactly Chris's first rodeo with making guitar amps. And I had played it already. I had already played it and no, this amp sounds great. And it just sounded awful. And they had this weird sizzle and things weren't really making any sense. And I was like, man, I called him. I was like, I don't know, dude. I don't know if something broke in transit.
Yeah, something died.
Yeah,
something's wrong.
Something's very wrong. Come check this out. And he comes over, and, he's kind of concerned because he's like, what in the world? What could it be? It's so weird. Because, again, he's thinking, I know how to build amps. This is very strange. And he comes over and he goes, dude. I'm like, what? He's like, look where the amp is. It was dead center in the middle of the shred shed, and the shred shed has a peak that goes right up in the middle. It was just getting a bunch of weird noise cancellation. So he literally just took it and turned it 45 degrees. And sounded great again.
Right. But you could probably go stick your head in that spot and talk, and you would sound weird. Like, it's just a weird spot in the room, probably.
Not a good spot. He's like, I see the problem. I was like, what's wrong? I put it there because I'm thinking, oh, this looks really good in this spot.
Yeah.
Like, everything is looking really tasty.
This is going to be a great shot.
Yeah. And yeah, it was, but I was like, oh, dude. Yeah, that'll do it.
Where you put it matters.
It does make a big difference, especially in a random untuned shed. Yeah.
But I guess it's so much of it. Like, I hear, pedal builders talking about the same sort of thing, right? Like, if you look at the circuits they're using just from a engineering standpoint, you'd say, oh, these parts are all wrong. You're not biasing the transistor right. Whatever, It's like, yeah, but listen to it. It does this cool thing. It's not right, but listen to it.
Yeah, there's an old forum story that I've repeated, but I can't remember where I read it. It was on my early like tone seeking days, and it was like an electronic engineering student that brought their Death by Audio pedal into their class, and the teacher opened it up and was like, "This is trash. The transistors are backwards. There's all kinds of things wrong with it. Like, why would anyone ever make a circuit like this?" And it's like, wow, same reason. It just sounds. Yeah, it's got the sound that we're looking for in this particular scenario.
Totally, and it's a whole different mentality because as far as it sounds like, I used to do everything, but I used to also be an electronics designer. That would go along with the loudspeakers. We made special processors and equalizers and compressors to pair up with the speakers, so they worked as a system. And
what company was this? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, yeah, it was a company called Apogee Sound.
Oh, I'm familiar.
Not the Apogee that most people are familiar
not that
with,
one. Okay.
Which is Apogee Electronics, the converter people.
Yeah.
This was a company that did, we did, I don't know, Broadway shows, Grammys, Oscars, lots of big tours. We were just for a little while there, the pinnacle of live sound loudspeakers.
Got it.
The company sort of exists now, not exactly, but in the 80s through the middle 90s, there was at least a decade, maybe a dozen years where we were kind of kicking butt, and then things unraveled a bit, but that's another story.
Sure.
But we were designing what at the time were cutting edge products. Now they seem pedestrian, right? Like we had loudspeakers in the 90s that had DSP built in with power amps built in. They were networkable, so you could talk to them from your laptop. You could deliver digital audio to them. Like, we were literally the only company on the planet that had that. That period of time, even though now it's just normal. All speakers have that, right?
Well, sure, but not in the 90s.
Not in the 90s,
no.
Exactly. And that was also one of the things that helped kill the company a little bit, was it's very hard to be a small company on that bleeding edge. So expensive to make all that happen.
Well, it's expensive, and you're trying to communicate to customers why this might actually be beneficial when they've never experienced anything like that before. So how would they know they even wanted it? Like, I don't need it. Never had it before.
But it was a perfect place to kind of grow up and work. I mean, it was my first job as a product designer and engineer, because we had to do everything. We were designing compressors, optocoupler-based compressors and FET-based compressors and VCA-based compressors, and just all the cool audio stuff. But it was all for having the coolest, most pristine, most powerful, biggest sound. Like, I couldn't design a pedal. We tried not to ever clip or distort or anything like that, right? All of the work was to be as pure as possible. So we talk about sagging power supplies and amps and how we love the way it sags.
You're
right?
like, no.
Design power supplies.
Yeah.
We would design it to not sag, right? I mean, that's not what you want.
We are brought to you today by Sweetwater, specifically the Gear Exchange. You may have heard about this. This is a place where you can go to buy and sell your used gear. Maybe you got a pedal over there that's just kind of collecting dust. Maybe there's something you've been eyeing from the Sweetwater catalog. Well, right now is a great time to turn that unused gear into something you're actually going to use. Even better, if you sell on the Gear Exchange, you can keep 100% of the sale as long as you choose a Sweetwater gift card as your payout method. That is not too shabby because, let's be honest, most of this buying and selling we do is just to fund new gear purchases, and that is a great way to reach a wide variety of customers and keep 100% in your pocket, or rather on your pedal board. So go check out the Sweetwater Gear Exchange and turn that unused gear into something that's actually going to help you write that next huge riff.
Hello there. I'd like to introduce you to your new best friend, the Chase Bliss Audio Lossy. Lossy is a collaboration between Chase Bliss and Goodhertz. And it's meant to give you some control over those weird digital artifacts that come with very compressed audio. You're hearing it right now. All the changes that are taking place are strictly coming from my playing dynamics. I'm just interacting with the pedal and letting it do its thing. In some true stereo goodness. If you'd like some more details about Lossy, I'd invite you to head over to chaseblinssaudio.com. I think you're gonna like what you find.
Yeah, I mean, and I've heard this story too, like talking to Tom Cram, who, when I was talking to him, he wasn't part of Digitech anymore, but now he is back to being part of Digitech now, because the company's kind of had a rebirth and all that. But he was talking about designing the DoD rubberneck analog delay and trying to work with Samsung engineers to do this, because that's who owned the company at the time.
Right.
And they're like, no, we could do this. We should do it like this. We should do it digitally, and we should do it. And he's like, no, that's not what we're doing. Yeah, I know you don't understand it, but trust me, it needs to be analog and it needs to be like this. And we want buckets. They're like, bucket brigades. Why would you use bucket brigades for anything? And us guitar players are like, oh yeah, bucket brigades. That's what we need.
Ooh, a bucket brigade.
Yeah. Ooh, the epitome of technology. Man, no, that's really cool. But you point out something really interesting though, is that there's a very weird split, and to guitarists it's just so obvious, and to non-guitarists it makes absolutely no sense. It's kind of just a weird dichotomy that we have in the audio world. But you're somebody who wears both hats, so you can wear both slippers, so to speak.
I do see them both. Yeah, I've spent many hours designing studio monitors, right, where it's just about pure pristine sound.
Mm-hmm.
And then now I'm taking all that and making guitars that sound weird in a good way, right?
They have a lot of character, a lot of their own.
Have a lot of character,
thing. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, it's not just a plank of wood with pickups and that looks cool, right? Trying to build as much unique, characterful things into it as possible.
I'm having a weird flashback, and I think I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I can't remember. Back early in, like when I just started realizing like how, like, oh, tube amps are a thing, and like, oh wow, this sounds different, that sounds different. Like, had just graduated beyond my crate solid state type of phase.
Yep.
My friend Leon, who does Pelican Noiseworks, he and I were like, man, these guitar cabinets though, they're expensive. Like, they're a lot of money for a cabinet. I'm pretty sure we could make one. And we did make one. He did most of the work. I helped him with a little bit of it here and there, but he did 90% of it. And we got done with it, and we're like, oh, that's why they're so expensive. He did a great job. It turned out really, really nice. But we had no idea what we were doing. We're just like, I think it should be about this size. I think it should be like this. Turned out really cool, but it was, we got done, and we're like, wow, that's why they're expensive. That was a lot of work.
Yep. I mean, that's the same thing pedal builders face that I face as a guitar builder is when people sit down and they do the simple math and they're like, what? It should only be $30 in parts. I could make that. It's like, all right, well.
Go for it. Like,
yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Oh, that's the argument that drives me probably crazier than anything. It's like, if you break anything down, like this Stanley razor knife probably cost them $1.50 to make.
Yeah.
How much would it cost me to make? Well, a lot, because I don't have the machines. I don't have the knowledge of how to do this. I don't, have any of that stuff. So yeah, while it costs them $1 or $2, and then they sell it for 14, that's just how things work. Unless you can literally fabricate anything and everything, and you're going to fabricate everything in your entire life that you use, that's a stupid argument. There's no other way to put it. And
it only comes to mind because I saw it on a forum recently. I won't say I won't say much more other than somebody was questioning my pricing, which to me was, and I of course didn't get involved because you don't.
Sure.
Don't say anything.
Don't feed the trolls.
Sort of.
Yeah.
No, he was actually being reasonably nice about it, but I'm sort of seen, I think, in the industry as someone who has more reasonably priced high-end guitars, right? I'm not on the top end of the price of things.
I would say that.
So when somebody says, "Oh, I don't see how you can charge $3,000 for something like that," it's it's like, well, all right. Luckily, 98% of the people see that it's a fair deal. But
right. I mean,
these things come up still from time to time.
I mean, I also understand it. Like, if that's not your thing, then there's guitars that exist that fit your price point. There's literally a guitar at every price point, from almost free, which probably means unplayable, but like it exists, it's the point, to the tippy top, 59 burst level thing. They're all through the price range, and if something isn't for you, it's not for you. I mean, for me, I like high-end guitars. I like expensive guitars, but I can't fathom a world in which I ever spend, $10,000-$15,000 on a single guitar. That just I don't see I can do that. But there are people who do, and that's great. Mm-hmm. That's fine.
Yeah, and that's totally cool. I just think that at around a $3,000 instrument, that's a lot of money, no question, right? But there are plenty of people making instruments similar to mine that are $1,000 more, $2,000 more, right? You got to want to get a custom shop Fender or a custom shop Gibson or a custom shop Martin, any of those.
Yep.
They could be twice what I'm charging.
Oh, yeah.
So I sort of feel like, I'm okay. I'm reasonable.
Yep. Yeah, and if it works for you and your business model and people keep ordering them, then what more can you really ask for at that point? That's kind of the ideal circumstance.
Yeah, and I like the fact that I don't want to say more regular people can buy these, but the people who can buy $10,000 guitars are maybe few and far between.
Sure.
Right? A $3,000 guitar, it's still a lot of money, but regular people can buy those, and that's cool.
You can.
I like being able to service regular people. I guess I'm regular people. You're regular people, right?
Right. Yeah. You can. I think 3,000 is something you can wrap your mind around. It's like, okay, I can envision.
It's a lot, but it's not insane.
Yeah. I don't have to cut off an arm. I can maybe a toe. I can do that. But yeah, it's a difficult thing. But then also just pricing things in this industry is, well, in any industry, not just this, but it's actually just hard to do, because you want people to be able to get it. You don't want to price yourself out of customers. That's stupid. That doesn't work. But at the same time, I've seen it happen, especially in pedals, where I've told this story before, and I won't name any names, but I have seen companies come out with a pedal. They're like, you know what? At this point in this time, this was years and years ago, we can sell this for $100 and make a profit. So they priced it at $99. Nobody bought it. Nobody wanted it.
Oh.
And so they're like, okay, we'll price it at $189 and see what happens.
Yeah, fancy up the graphics and double the price.
Exactly. That's exactly what they did. They fancied the graphics up, double the price, couldn't keep them in stock. And so there's a weird thing where like the pricing comes into the marketing, and like that might sound kind of shisty, but like the point is they tried to do it the way they wanted to, and nobody responded to it. So what do? You can either throw it all in the trash, even though it's a good product, or you can try something to get it to move.
Yeah.
So, but it's just,
and maybe they got lucky getting that price up, because a lot of times, and I've probably done this myself. Like you look at the numbers, and sometimes it's hard, especially in the beginning, to really get your arms around what your costs are.
Yes. Yep.
So you think, oh, I could sell this guitar for $1,800, and I'd have $700 profit or whatever the numbers are, and I could that could work. Except you forgot about the extra cost of electricity for running the machines and the heat in the shop, and sandpaper adds up, right? I mean, I've got $10 worth of sandpaper in every guitar, and there's it's just so many little things. It's hard to get your head around early on.
The mistake I see newer builders of in this industry in particular make, like, and I speak from that just because that's what I'm exposed to mostly. I'm sure it happens elsewhere as well. Is they don't price in their labor. So I see that constantly. It happens all the time. So I'll have that exact same front conversation with somebody starting out. They're like, okay, I think I can sell it for this. And I said, okay, but what's your labor cost? Well, I'm just doing it. Like, okay, well, that's not going to work long term. It just won't. So you need to put whatever you think you can hire somebody for in your market.
That's right.
And you need to pencil out that time and plan on it, even if you're just doing it yourself, because at some point you're going to need to do that. And then the other thing I see people make a mistake is they don't factor in dealer margin as well. If you never want to do dealer margin, that's okay. I still think you should plan on it, because you never know what could happen. You never know who might come along knocking on your door. And if you have no room in there for them, you might miss out on some opportunities, even if you think you're never, ever going to do dealers. So
that's right. And that's one of the reasons I've had to raise my prices a little bit over the years, was I didn't have enough dealer margin built in. Because when I first started this, I was not really thinking I would sell through dealers. I was going to build, 6 or 8 or 10 custom guitars on the side per year, no dealers. And of course, it's turned into exactly the opposite of that.
Right.
40% of my sales are through dealers, and they need some margin. So
yeah, and they're an important part of the ecosystem too. I know in previous years, people have heard me talk, and I maybe came across as a little bit anti-dealer, which I didn't mean to, and I'm really not. It's just I think it's important to do both. And there are a lot of companies, especially older companies in this niche, that don't sell through dealers, and I think they are kind of shooting themselves in the foot, even though that was normal for a very long time. So I think you need to do both, and dealers are a really important part of the ecosystem that need to be factored in when pricing stuff. I didn't expect to get here, but this is
from dealer margin back to loudspeaker cabinet resonances.
We really did it on this episode. Well, we recorded for about 30 minutes last time, and we're about 30 minutes deep now. So I think that makes for a full normal episode.
Right. 2 half episodes that don't relate in any way.
That's right.
All in one.
That's right. It's just 2 guys being nerds, which is fine. You've answered the classic questions before, but I still want to give you the opportunity to, take the floor, shout out anybody you want to shout out, plug anything you want to plug, say hi to your great aunt or whatever you want to do right now. This is the floor is yours.
Yeah. What would I say to the world right now? Right now, I think just because I have so many friends who are musicians and obviously customers who are musicians, is to remind people to go see live music.
Ah, yes.
I don't want to say the pandemic's over or it's not. I don't know, but it's safe enough. Go see some live music. Pay, put some money in the band's pockets.
Buy some merch.
Buy some merch, exactly.
Buy some CDs. I know it sounds kind of weird, but some people do make CDs. And Spotify isn't paying anyone unless they get over a certain threshold of streams in 2024. I don't know if anybody's heard that. They're not paying. So if you don't get, I think it's somewhere around 1,000 streams. Don't quote me on that, but Google this. Right. They're putting thresholds on what they'll pay out.
It's a pretty low threshold. But the fact that it now exists,
I think
is
it's per
scary, right?
month though. So like,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, not per year.
yeah. So once you, 1,000 per year is not that much, but per month for somebody just starting out is actually quite a bit.
Sure.
So
And the fact that it even exists means that it's not long before it's 1,200 and then 1,400.
yeah, and they claim that they're doing it to combat streaming farms, which is a thing that exists.
I don't even know what that is, but that's okay.
It's when you set up a bunch of computers to artificially inflate numbers on streaming platforms. And,
All right, fake listens.
yeah, I don't know. That seems like a stretch. I feel like that would affect larger artists more than smaller ones, but I don't know. I have no idea. That's just what they're saying. So technically Spotify hosts this podcast. Don't shut me off.
But the point is, if you go see a band and you're like, why do these people still have CDs?
Mhm.
Well, the reason is because it's something they can sell and they make some money and it helps a lot.
It does. Yep.
You know, a lot of times merch sales on a smaller gig could be greater than the pay for the gig. So it really helps.
It does. So go see live music, everybody. I think that's a great spot to wrap this up. Maybe we can slide over to Patreon and talk about dealer margins some more. I don't know. We'll find out.
Awesome.
Find something to talk about. All right.
I know what you want to talk about.
You know what I want to talk about. Yeah. All right, everybody. For Barry, this is Blake. And as always, folks, good luck and good tones. Alrighty, folks, there you have it. There's another episode in the can. Barry and I talk about cars and aliens and some other nonsense over on Patreon. So if you'd like to support this show, head over to patreon.com/tonemob, where for $5 a month, you can get extra episodes beamed directly to your ears every single week, including this week. There's more with my dude Barry. There is a ton of content over there, and if you would please consider supporting the show, it would really mean a lot to me. All right, folks, that's it for now. I'm going to have some more for you here in just a couple days, actually. Look at me go. All right, talk to you on the internet very, very soon. Bye-bye. One last thing before we totally sign off here. I just want to remind you that if you do any shopping at Stringjoy, that's Stringjoy guitar strings made in Nashville, that will help me out as well. As I've said for years, I'm heavily involved in that company, and I really do think they're making the best products on the market. So if you would like to try custom strings, go to tonemob.com/stringjoy and check them out today. I seriously love what the team down there is doing. I help them out with all kinds of things, and by you supporting them, you are also supporting me as well. And hey, you need some strings, so why not get some custom strings just for your guitar and playing style? Again, the link for that is tonemob.com/stringjoy, and that will take you right to their website, and you can do all your shopping through there, and that will help everyone involved out. So thank you very much. Talk to you next time. We are brought to you by the wonderful folks at Gun Street Wiring Shop. Yes, Gun Street Wiring Shop. I've talked about them before. I used to say based out of Bend, Oregon, but guess what? Sean moved to my neck of the woods. Sean's in Portland. Sean is awesome and has helped me with a bunch of stuff lately. And if you have wiring needs for your guitar, he can help you too. If you want to get weird with it, he can get weird. If you just need to spruce things up a little bit, there's your guy. He takes all the guesswork out of doing your guitar wiring, and he makes it simple, and his customer service is top-notch, and I can't say enough good things about Gun Street as a company. I really respect Sean and what he's all about, and the product is top-notch. I've got 3 different guitars that now have Gun Street harnesses in them, and I could not be happier. So go to gunstreetwiringshop.com and check them out.
This is Krista Makes, guitarist and vocalist for Less Than Jake, and host of Krista Makes a Podcast, a songwriting podcast where every week I'm joined by an amazing guest to break down the writing, recording, and release of one iconic song from their career. In our giant evergreen back catalog of episodes, we've had rock legends such as Dee Snider and Huey Lewis, punk rock favorites like Mark Hoppus, Fat Mike, and Brett Gurewitz, and up-and-coming artists of today such as Liz Stokes of the Beths and Genesis Owusu. We've had guests from all genres and styles of music, and I guarantee that if you peruse our back catalog, you'll see several episodes that'll make you say, man, I gotta hear that. Whether you're a fan of music or a creator of music yourself, You'll take away a whole new appreciation for the songs you know and love. Krista Makes a Podcast is available for free on all the places you could possibly listen to podcasts, and new episodes come out every Monday.
Hey, this is Chris Swinney, formerly of the Ataris and currently host of That One Time on Tour, part of the Sound Talent Media Podcast Network. Have you ever wondered what it's really like on the road? The highs can be euphoric, but the lows can be crushing. Join me every week as I chat with industry pros about what it's like living out their wildest dream and, in some cases, their worst nightmare. Past guests of the show include members of NoFX, Pennywise, Bad Religion, and more. Listen and subscribe at soundtalentmedia.com.